Singapore is recognized worldwide as a first world country that is home to an impressive global hub for finance, education, technology, and healthcare. Singapore has a strong government, a cohesive society, and a strong economy. Hence, it's no wonder that Singapore is often portrayed by many as a green paradise that resembles a safe haven. However, there are still signs of poverty and underprivilege in Singapore despite the seemingly successes of Singapore. Hence, we have decided to hit the streets and ask the people of Singapore about what they feel about poverty and the underprivileged in Singapore.
First question is, what's your perception of wealth in Singapore, and do you feel that poverty exists?
Yes, I mean, I think clearly there's quite a large gap between rich and poor. I kind of work in the financial area, and you can see lots of, kind of wealthy people, good education. But then as you get a bit further out into the heartlands, you can kind of see the disparity a little bit. Also, I think, from a tourist perspective, a lot of the time they see, the nice buildings and everything around the centre, and they don't often see some of the less privileged people or areas, I think.
My perception of wealth in Singapore is that it's not distributed properly, and why it still exists is why it still exists, is it?
Yes.
Why it still exists is mainly because people do not have the necessary skills find jobs, especially when it comes from the older generations. So, and they might not have their children to take care of them also. So they might have to work in jobs which do not pay well, or and they cannot work in jobs which can pay them well, high skilled jobs.
I think the perception of wealth in Singapore is more materialistic, such as having the amount of properties you have, amount of money you have, the figure in your bank account, and whether you have a car or not, or what houses you stay in. So I think it's a perception of wealth. And I think poverty do exist, but it's in a rare case scenario. Yeah.
I definitely think poverty exists, but it depends on everybody's definition of poverty. Because to some people, if I don't have a $2,000 income, I'm very poor. To some people, $2,000 is a lot. So I think poverty depends on the comfort level of whoever is living with. From my experience and the people around me, I am quite aware that quite a fair bit of people who has over the years fallen into hard times. So they used to be really rich. When I call the definition of rich, it could be the fact that they used to be CEOs of companies or owning companies themselves, and then the last few years, for some reason, business went bust, and then they start to struggle with their livelihood. Yeah, so those cases happen. So you can go from wealth to poverty, and there are also many people in Singapore who really struggles with just providing with their family or themselves with meeting their daily needs. So there are really people who have months and months of rental overdue, months and months of electricity bills overdue because they simply either because of illnesses or because they couldn't find work, or they have lots of family members to take care of and they couldn't survive.
How widespread do you think poverty is in Singapore? Have you heard of any stories or have any personal experiences regarding such cases of poverty or the underprivileged in Singapore?
As I mentioned before, I think poverty is very not so widespread, and it's very rare. It's a rare occasion, but I think it still exists. So personal experience not so much, but however I've heard of stories such as during charity work they always broadcast a few stories of those unfortunate people, such as they living in one room flat, or even like those elderlies that lack their child support when they are old and have to go out to work and to support themselves.
I was here in Singapore 10 years ago, and I just come back a few weeks ago actually, and I did notice quite a big difference. A few more people actually begging on the streets, selling little tissues, also with little placards saying asking for money for various things. I mean, 10 years ago I didn't see that, so that was quite a shock. Obviously in other countries and cities you see that quite often. Also, I've noticed when you go to the food courts a lot of the time, there are immigrant workers, obviously, but some of the ladies, clearing away a lot of the dishes that seem to be kind of quite old local people. I think, certainly when you go to European countries, people of that age probably wouldn't be working, certainly not in those kind of low-paid jobs. So I often kind of wonder, is there, some kind of pension security for older people, or are they kind of forced to work, things like that. I also spoke to a few people who seem to have difficulty when they get to retiring age to pay for medical expenses and things, and often relying on family members. So there's quite a bit of emphasis on, family members having to pay for older people when they get sick. All in all, again, when you visit accommodation, you can see some very nice condos, and then the HDB flats. I wouldn't say they're kind of rough or they don't look poor, particularly some of them. I mean, when you go to some European countries, there's quite a lot of deprivation in some kind of council estates. You don't really get that antisocial behaviour as much here, which is quite reassuring. But still, you can see some, depending on where you go. I mean, some kind of some areas do look a little bit more run down than others, I think. You do find kind of rich and poor living quite close together, generally speaking. But one thing I do like about Singapore is often you'll find everybody eating in the same places and food courts and things like that, and there's not that, doesn't seem to be as big a segregation, so to speak. So in that sense, it's it's pretty good.
I guess through your different walks in life, you can see maybe you go to a hawker center and you see the aunties are clearing their your plates, your bowls. They might not be paid very well as compared to maybe some other people who live in landed property. As you can see, in Singapore, there's really big houses, and I believe these people must be paid well to afford to live in such luxury. Yeah.
So for the past 2 to 3 years, my family and I have actively tried to engage with helping. I mean, we believe strongly in helping specific cases when it comes to helping the poor, or less fortunate or of a lower income. So for example, we prefer to follow or give donation to specific cases where they are truly calling for help in a particular area. Or there are also a lot of Facebook groups that they are created for less fortunate people or lower income families, and through there you could see that actually many people actually come forward, many Singaporeans actually come forward, and they will actually advertise, I have these things available, I would like to bless it to a lower income family. And there are a lot of such respondents who come forward and say they will greatly appreciate any help in that sense.
I think the government does quite a good job of looking after poor people, because there are such things as rental flats, there are subsidies, lately for the pioneer generation and the Merdeka generation. That goes a long way towards helping people overcome basic needs like health needs and accommodation. So I think poverty is not as acute as what you find in some other countries. But poverty, of course, exists in every country.
Despite the seemingly successful society in our nation, why do you think poverty still exists?
Again, poverty exists for many different reasons. I think not everybody is fully capable of taking care of themselves, especially the aged. A lot of them, after a while, it is a well-known fact that it is harder to get a job as you grow older. The society sometimes seems to, for different reasons, welcome a more agile and more flexible workforce. So the elderly might find it a struggle to earn enough money to support their family, or for some reason, and I think it's even more apparent nowadays because lots of family members starts to maybe have a disability, a illness, and because of that, lots of money are needed to just make sure that the family can take care of or for medical support. So because of that, I think they don't have enough to spend for everything else.
I think it is impossible to eradicate poverty altogether because poverty does come the way of people who are handicapped. It can be physical handicap, mental handicap. It can be having parents who are not very far-sighted. They have huge, they have many children and find it difficult to bring them up and to give them the basic needs. So some children will find that they need to stop schooling to look after the younger ones and so forth. So it becomes a vicious cycle in that way.
I feel that one thing is that, like what I said just now, the older generation don't have enough skills. So, main one thing is that not enough effort is being put in place for the older generation to gain the skills, especially when like the development of technology. So the older generation might not understand how this technology can lead or can help our economy grow. So they do not focus too much on this technology, and also because there might be a competition of jobs with the young itself. Because as the young grow, after the advent of technology, right, they understand how technology works. They are more educated because their education system is getting better at the same time. So it's a very strong, a lot of competition between the young, and therefore some people do lose out, and therefore that's why they are poor as compared on Singapore standard.
I think that poverty exists everywhere regardless of whether your economy is successful or not. There are people that will be left behind, like even though your economy is successful. Then there are also the elderly which have been abandoned by their child, so that even though they have worked so hard before to support them, so they have to support themselves and work hard even though they are old already. So this is where the poverty comes in.
Do you have any opinions on Singaporeans' view on wealth and poverty in Singapore? Like, are they doing enough to help, or are they not doing anything at all to help alleviate the situation of poverty in Singapore?
I guess they help, like such as Skills Future Singapore for the older generation to gain skills, and maybe certain sponsor bursary or like any awards given to certain families with lower income. But I feel that this may not be helping them fully. It may help them in the short term, but when it comes to long term, they might not benefit, because like the root issue is still there, where they do not have enough skills and there's still a lot of competition. So maybe one way is like the government can open more career options, I guess.
It's a good question. I mean, difficult for me to say a little bit because I've only just come back, but my emphasis a little bit is that people often are too busy with their own lives, very busy working, very busy looking after themselves and their own family, to often kind of consider other people. I suppose the nature of the city is very fast paced, there's a lot of pressure, people are kind of worried about their own children, their own grandchildren, their own parents, and often, I think as a society sometimes they don't always kind of think about other people a little bit. It can be a little, sometimes people take it for granted that maybe the government or other people are going to look after them, and it's the same everywhere, I suppose. Sometimes people can get a bit selfish, I guess, but yeah, I mean, on the whole, I think there's a perception, I think, that people think, oh well, people are paying their taxes or the government's doing it or somebody else is doing it, and there's a tendency to see it as somebody else's problem sometimes.
I think that they are doing something about it. Like this can be seen through all the charity shows, such as the President Star Charity and like the various variety shows that we have sometimes on Channel 8 and Channel 5, where they call for donations and we just need to dial the number to donate. And the figures is usually quite big, like a few $1 million for these charity shows. So I think that Singaporeans are playing a part. to help in the poverty also by donating money.
I think it is encouraging to see the large numbers of people who go out of their way to volunteer and to give. They give of their food, they give of their services, and to that extent, this is something very encouraging. People are aware of poverty around, but because the work, the kind of life style that we have in Singapore, people do work very long hours, so it is difficult to expect a lot from a big proportion of the population. They have difficulty coping, and they must necessarily look after themselves before they start thinking of looking after anybody else.
I think increasingly there are a huge number of people who are very concerned about such issues. It is very apparent if you go into Facebook, as I mentioned, there are many Facebook groups created just for such purposes. There are, for example, Park $2 project, so those are projects where they gather donations from Singaporeans, willingly to support, and they put together monies, and then there are a group of people who buy monthly supplies just for some of the needy families in Singapore, so there are groups like that.
Do you have any opinions or ideas on how we can further help to solve the problem of poverty in Singapore?
Again, I think poverty is a very huge, it's an increasingly, it's a society issue, right? If you are talking about it generally as a whole, the government can put together a lot of different schemes, and again, sometimes it can be subjected to abuse. So it depends on how they control it, or it depends on how we have a good classification. But the government will actually have a series of different ways to help. A lot of different non-for-profit organizations are also coming together to support, as well as Singaporeans. So I think as a whole, the country is moving towards a good direction. Yeah.
I think to reduce poverty, I think you shouldn't despise those that are poor, and also try to give them a helping hand. Like for example, trying to have some lessons to help them upgrade themselves, and attain skills to help them earn money, or perhaps even as simple as just giving them a bit of financial assistance, and help them attain their daily necessity and help to reduce their burdens. Yeah.
I guess it's very difficult because we are students after all, but I guess we can help in some short-term issue, such as maybe donations, or we can help like through teaching or setting up courses for maybe the elderly to learn different skills that is required in this generation.
Possibly, I think people should consider a little bit more. I mean, I know there's quite a few outlets for voluntary work if people have the time. It's not just about giving money, it's about giving your time and helping people voluntarily if you can. I think there are a few societies near where I live where people give, even if it's only an hour a week, they give a little bit of time to help people who are, disabled or sick, or give classes to people learning difficulties, things like that. I think obviously everybody could do a little bit more, really, and I think the government do quite a good job with maintaining the social structure, things like roads, parks, and facilities for people to use, so they don't always feel as if they're on their own. So I think there's pros and cons, really.
I think what we are doing, we are on the right track. We do show a lot of empathy for people who are handicapped in any way. We do, I read of late, the HDB does reduce rental for people who employ handicapped people. And there are schools like the Mine Schools, the Rainbow Center, lots of these places which try their best to keep the mentally and physically handicapped people occupied and improving to the best of their ability. And I think that is as much as we can do.
Okay, so thank you for your time for this interview. Okay, that's the end.